The following podcast is recorded and produced by Emerge, a media creators co-op, in affiliation with the network at bicbp-radio.com.
Welcome to the Double Fist Punch Podcast. I'm Rick, and this is my co-host, Rich. I'm tired.
You got a new job, so you work at different shifts now.
Yes. This would normally be my bedtime.
It's the end of the day you chose, and this is the beginning of my day. So welcome back. We see you're sitting in the command chair today. Julian got demoted. He got promoted to the USS Connecticut. He's gone for 5 weeks. So.
Yep. He's temporarily commanding the Defiant while everybody else is somewhere else. I don't know where they would be at this time, but.
So we missed it. We're a little bit. We haven't been able to get together for a couple weeks. So here we are. So we're back. So what do we have this week?
This week we have we're starting with The Balance of Terror. Hold on. I think I have to face it this way. We have The Balance of Terror.
With Kirk and Sulu printed wrong. I think it's like a mirror image. I think it's printed backwards, if I remember correctly. Isn't like the logo on the wrong side of the chest? Is that the one, or am I thinking of a different one?
Wait, oh.
I think that one's printed backward for some other. I always laugh about that. Yeah.
I should check it out.
Yeah, if you look like it's on the wrong side, it's like they printed it backward. Like this should Scotty should have been over here, but whatever. That's not that important. But someone in the graphic design department didn't realize like where the logos were, you know.
So I guess I'll just start with our blurb here. Federation outpost destroyed by Romulans. It's a game of cat and mouse for Kirk and the Romulan commander, Mark Leonard, otherwise known as Serac, but that's not for a while, whose cloaking device renders his ship invisible and very deadly. How long can Kirk protect the Enterprise from this unseen enemy? This is our first look at the Romulans, and we'll learn why they mysteriously resemble the Vulcans. Mark Leonard is the only performer to have portrayed a Romulan, a Vulcan, Journey Babel, the episode I just referenced.
Yep.
And a Klingon, Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He's the Klingon in the first movie he's the first person we hear speak Klingonese, too. Oh, yeah. They wrote the language for the Klingon language was developed for Star Trek 1. It was continued and developed more for Star Trek 3. But they had decided they wanted a Klingon language, and then they decided to use Mark Leonard as the captain that's destroyed by Voyager 6, which we don't have.
Yeah, in
the first movie.
In the main series.
And the makeup. That's the first time we get the fancy schmancy Klingon makeup, too. And actually, back then, people liked it. We liked that. It not like the newer Discovery makeup that the Klingons came up with the Klingons that didn't look good at all. But people really liked it. I remember when Star Trek 1, the motion picture, came out, that people really liked the fact that we had, like, Klingons that looked Klingon. They didn't look like just regular humans. They weren't just like grease paint and Fu Manchu mustaches and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, they had they still had their faces uncovered mostly, so they were able to emote and stuff like that. The problem with Discovery Klingons, they actually kind of walked it back a little bit.
They just kind of pretended that didn't happen. I feel like they just said, like, yeah, nobody likes this. And now, well, because obviously the concern was when they did Picard Season 3 and they brought Worf in, they couldn't use that style of makeup. They had to use... and they actually went back to the original processes. It wasn't the same people, but it was the same like templates and everything. And they kind of brought back the cool Klingon makeup, which everybody really likes. So,
could you imagine if they brought back Worf and he looked like that?
Red skin or purple skin, or he was bald. You know, like there's things you can change, but there's just kind of stupid stuff. And that's the funny thing about this episode that we're going to discuss, is because the canon that they create is that no human or nobody from the Federation has ever seen a Romulan.
Yeah, they really kind of just said,
And then we're stuck with
Yeah.
this now. This probably like as in the Bible for Star Trek. This is the most obnoxious one, right? Like,
oh yeah, they set a lot of the groundwork for the later series in this
Right.
episode specifically, like the fact that they used to be Vulcans, like
right.
the Great Schism, I think, is
Right.
kind of finds its roots here.
And that becomes a big thing. That becomes a big thing, obviously, in Next Generation. It becomes a big thing in Star Trek 6. The last Next Generation movie was that 10. Nemesis, even Picard. And then even into Discovery, because there's the 2 episodes of Next Generation Unification where Leonard Nimoy plays Spock in, off into the future. They actually, if you remember that, like, I don't know if you've watched Discovery, they had Unification episode part 3. Did you notice that? Do you know that they did that? So on the Next Generation, Leonard Nimoy is in a 2-parter with Captain Picard where he's trying to fight for unification between Vulcan and Romulus. And then what they do in Discovery season 4 or whatever it is, they do unification. They call it Unification Part 3. So it's like that eventually unification between Romulan and Vulcan does happen in the future. So
I would hope that eventually happens, especially after the destruction of Romulus.
I think that's kind of like, if I remember the episode where they kind of they discussed that. So I love Balance of Terror. I think it's really I really like this episode. I like the concept. I like the submarine aspect that, like, that, there's some things that don't work, but let's get through it. Let's go, we can kind of get started. So
Yeah, I mean, like we start with the crew. They're having a wedding, which is actually
Yeah.
kind of an easy part to forget because it's just kind of the B plot.
ever since the ships of whatever of yore and whatever he says, he's like, this captains have had this great opportunity or what a great chance to whatever. I like that scene.
Wonder if they, because they bring that back in other series as well. I wonder
Yeah.
if that's like an actual naval thing, or if Gene Roddenberry just.
I believe it is. Like, I believe that because I've seen it in other media. I've seen it in other things where the captain, like Pirates of the Caribbean, like Barbossa marries Will and Keira Knightley. I can't think of her character. Elizabeth. He marries them in the 3rd movie while they're fighting like pirates. They're fighting like evil creatures, whatever, the dead from Davy Jones's Locker. So like he's marrying them while they're sword fighting. So Pirates of the Caribbean are ridiculous movies, but I love those. But yes, definitely according to Barbossa and Captain Kirk, I don't know if it's legal, but apparently it is. So I guess it makes sense because who else is going to do it? You don't have a priest floating around necessarily on a ship.
No. Yeah, I get. Yeah,
I mean, hey, if you can get certified online nowadays to do a wedding, why can't a guy who's actually the captain of a ship have that extra privilege?
I mean, honestly, I would prefer that over a
internet.
priest, to be honest. Like, could you imagine if you got the captain of the actual Enterprise to wed you?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'd rather have William Shatner. I mean, not William Shatner, but like Captain Kirk perform my ceremony than some miscellaneous priest or maybe deity or whatever guy that I don't know.
I mean, they are.
Although my friend from high school does weddings. She's a certified wedding person, and she does them every weekend. So she does a nice job.
Just got to make sure she gets promoted to be captain of the Enterprise, which is being rebuilt as we speak.
So yeah, like since we're going off on a crazy tangent here, like when they used to have the Star Trek, and I wonder if they do this up in Taekwondo, whatever it's called up in New York, where they have the real sets. But where we're talking about doing a trip there. When they had the Star Trek experience at the Las Vegas Hilton, there was a like a walkthrough kind of simulator ride thing where you went through and you actually went onto the bridge of the Enterprise D. And I know that you could get married on the bridge of the Enterprise D. Like that was a thing you could get married. So I remember seeing like tons of people, pictures and stuff. Even online now, like people will post on different Star Trek fan pages that when they had the Star Trek experience, which was back in the 90s or whatever it was, that you could there were people they dress up in there. A lot of them would dress up like Worf and Jadzia, like they'd get like similar dresses like that, and they would get married on the bridge of the Enterprise D, which I thought would be kind of. I mean, if you're gonna get married, you might as well get married someplace that's mad, like.
I mean, yeah.
So I mean, if you're not religious, and get married where you want instead of the city hall or whatever. So
anyway,
this wedding doesn't go as well. It gets
No.
interrupted.
Well, yeah, they never actually get married.
No, they don't. Never.
Yeah,
And Kirk doesn't swoop in and pick her up or nothing, like to make his move.
that would have been very.
So, what are you doing Friday night?
She actually appears again in the next episode we cover, so this episode reminded me heavily of Hunt for Red October.
Sure.
Just the way it all carried. Like, I like the technology that's at play here because, like, I kind of like the way that Cloak is portrayed in this. Like, they've established in previous episodes that the phaser crews need to see what they're shooting at.
Right.
At least I believe that's been established. So the ship can detect the cloaked vessel. It's basically emitting essentially sonar. Right, because the Enterprise in this situation is a destroyer, and the Romulans are acting as a submarine.
Sure.
It even goes as far as, the Enterprise is using depth charges, and the Romulans have a big ass.
Oh, I never thought of it that way. That they're kind of firing off. They are firing off phasers just to kind of see if they can, just to kind of shake them and kind of get a sense of where they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
I never thought of that.
I mean, that's how they destroy them with those depth charges that they're firing off, and the fact that the let me just make sure. 1 second. The fact that sorry,
that's right.
The levels were weird. The fact that the Romulans have this thing that fires this incredibly powerful. Plasma ball. It's very torpedo coated.
Right. I think what's cool about this episode is that stuff too. I agree that because it's people I've seen stuff over the years online about this one where I don't understand the continuity. Again, they even say it in the episode, this was a prototype ship. They never planned for this ship to go back. This ship is designed to test if the Federation has gotten any better since the Romulan Federation War from whenever 100 and something years ago.
Apparently
what was that?
Apparently they have.
And so they were trying to decide if invasion would be plausible, if they could take them on now, because obviously that's what the Romulan Empire wanted to do. And so they really put all and this weapon that they have is almost an inefficient weapon. And that's why we never see this weapon again. They don't have it on the ship the next time we fight the Romulans because it's an impractical weapon. It for whatever reason, it takes too much of the ship's energy. It's almost like a Death Star type of thing. Like they probably have to channel so much of the ship's power into firing this, putting everything into this energy that it exhausts their fuel reserves and stuff. So they don't ever return to it. And the cloak is pretty cool because it's kind of funny. Like I'm not sure in sci-fi if we've seen a cloaking device before this.
I can't think of any.
So, I mean, it's funny because Star Wars just calls it a cloaking device. They didn't come up with a new name for it. They literally just used the Star Trek terminology cloaking device.
Yeah, it's actually interesting how they're I'm not going to get too far into Star Wars, but Star Wars just very quickly just goes oh, that ship's way too small for a cloaking device.
Right.
I wonder if that was even just a direct reference. Rather than trying to ape it, they're just we're just going to reference Star Trek.
Right. Well, even there's terminology, things like stun. Stun, I don't think stun was I guess stun gun is the thing we have now, but I think I don't know where the term stun came from. I guess you're stunned, but the setting of stun on a phaser is from Star Trek, and then they even in episode 4, set your weapons to stun, and they stun Princess Leia. And I remember thinking about that many years ago. I'm they just called it stun. They're well, apparently Star Trek's canon in the Star Wars universe, and they've already watched it, so I just call it stun. But there is cool stuff. The weapon is cool. I like that they they came up with a cool looking like alien bridge. I like the costuming of the Romulans. I think they didn't like they spent a few bucks on the costumes for this thing. I like it. I like that it's very submarine. The bridge of the Romulan ship seems very submarine-y.
I really like how like this kind of like gets lost a little bit in like later Star Trek, which for better or for worse, all of the alien species. I think this is the first like hostile like great power of the Alpha Quadrant that we are actually introduced to in the show, because this is before the Klingons.
That's right. We haven't met the. Wow, that's a really, really good point. Wow, I never thought of that. Wow, that's just again, that's one of the reasons I like doing this because I've just always thought about the Klingons, and I guess we have not seen we haven't even heard the term Klingons yet. That's interesting.
Yeah, like we haven't even met them. This is even before the Gorn. So,
yeah.
Like, this is the first...
And the Gorns are a one-off. Like, we don't see the Gorns or the Orion. Like, we know about the Orions, but, like, we don't really get the Orions as, like, they're more like... they're just kind of pirates.
Yeah.
So the only real bad guys, like, we haven't had, like, a true, you're right. That's, like, the Romulans are the first true big bad out there that return, that we don't get a one-off of.
Yeah, a big bad that's also, like... close technologically to
right.
the Federation, rather than just being some omnipotent entity or
right.
Energy field or whatever. The fact that, and what I really like. Oh wait, I was about to say the thing that I like about the alien species that are introduced in terms of the level of the Romulans and the Klingon and the
right.
Gorn is their culture is different, but they still behave like people,
Sure.
Like they, in Strange...
The Romulans particular, maybe the
yeah.
Gorns not as much, but I agree with you. I know what you mean by that. Yeah.
I mean, even the Gorn, like when we first meet them and Kirk
right.
has his whole fight with them, the Gorn says, "You invaded our space."
Right.
So like, there's
right.
like this.
Oh, that's a good point. Right.
Like,
yeah.
There's a justification. Like, I think in Strange New Worlds, they I like Strange New Worlds, but they kind of go overboard with it. Like, the Gorn are just demonic things.
Yeah, like, the Gorns aren't like, yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the Gorn stuff, it's almost like they wanted an alien, Sigourney Weaver alien type bad guy. They were trying to find, and they used the Gorn. And the Gorn jump in, we see Gorn once in Enterprise as well. And no, but I mean, I agree. I think like the Romulans, we develop a culture. They're a warrior race. They have a lot of honor. There's a lot of internal politics. Like there is so much canon in this one episode, which lays out everything about the Romulans forever. Like that, oh, he's got friends in powerful places, like that there's like corruption in the Romulan Empire. They even mention that there's like, it's funny because they even mention that there's Romulan and there's the moon too. And that all comes back in Nemesis. Like, the Remy or whatever, there's like two races of Romulans. The Remans or whatever, like, which is obviously from
Romulus and Remus,
which is from Greek mythology or whatever. Is that Greek? I don't know which mythology.
Probably
it is.
Roman mythology.
Roman mythology. So like it's definitely like
they're definitely a Roman coded alien
for sure.
race.
Yeah, because they got the Senate and they
Centurion.
got Centurion and all that, which is fine. I mean,
that's fine.
I like the little bit of prejudice that we get concept in this episode with the helmsman, the guy where Chekhov usually would be sitting in the future.
Yeah, he's got kind of like a generational quarrel with it. Wasn't that like?
It's like if your family had lost a relative in the service and they had fought, I don't know, in the Spanish-American War, let's say, or maybe I guess we could go back as far. We're getting close to the point where we could use World War II. You're anti. You don't like Japanese people because your great grandfather died at Pearl Harbor. Yeah. I think that you could see, especially like in the case of the sneak attack concept. I think this character has, and he served because his whole family has served, because he says that like it's a generational thing. And I love the line that the guy goes and he gives his information, and Kirk says to him, "Their war, not yours." Like he shuts him down right away. Like we're not doing that here. Like, and again, that's one of the reasons why Captain Kirk's such a great character, and it's written so well. Because even when they go to the briefing room, and they after they kind of have that first interaction, and that's that. Well, I guess I'm jumping ahead because I do like when Spock is able to lock onto the bridge somehow, and we see the Romulans, and everybody's like, "Holy fuck!" Like he looks like he's a Romulan, and like clearly like. It's early in the series, and we know that the Vulcans are a big part of the Federation, but it's almost like it almost doesn't make any sense nowadays when you think about that, like prejudice.
It's still at the point where it feels like kind of like an officer exchange program, almost like
I would right.
The Star Service, as it's called at this time, really feels like it's more just humans, and then we don't really get into the lore that Spock chose the Federation over Vulcan, the Vulcan Science Academy, until Journey of Babel. Like we don't really get that Vulcan is a big player in the universe until we get to the Journey of Babel. Like we don't really, right? I don't think we really get the sense of, they don't start universe building in terms of the planets, the Telosians and the Tellarites and everything else that we're going to get until real Andorians, like until we get to that episode. And that's another episode I can't wait to cover because of the amount of lore that we get out of certain episodes, because we get to see that the Federation is a little bit bigger. Like we're still very cowboy diplomacy, so to speak, right now. It's really just the humans at this point still.
Right. It's remember, like I love that line from Star Trek 6, like that the Federation is a Homo sapiens only club. Like there's like there's a line with that in the Prejudice of episode of Star Trek 6. And she goes, present company excluded. I like that there is that, and I think that's a big, huge change that they went for when they did Next Generation, to make the ship very diverse. Not everybody's from Earth. Like we have a lot of alien characters. And obviously Deep Space Nine and Voyager, like Deep Space Nine goes really over the top with that.
Yeah, Deep Space Nine, we have a significant amount of like non-human Starfleet officers who are.
I'd say the cast is the humanoids are in the minority on that episode, on the cast.
Yeah,
Bashir, Sisko, and
Trill,
and Bashir, Bisco, and O'Brien are the only true humans. I mean, I don't count Jake because he's not in Starfleet. Yeah. But then you have Odo, you have Trill, you have Kira, and then obviously and I guess you could throw Quark into the mix because Worf comes later. No, definitely. So I like that.
And all of this starts at this episode. Like
there's a lot of really cool things that start with this episode, and it's done well too. And I think, seeing the ship and then like going as high warp speed as possible to try to outrun that weapon. Mm-hmm. They're a scary alien too. Like they attack the moon, the one outpost on whatever outpost it is, and the guy's like 3 miles underneath the thing, and it's solid iron, and it's still like they're done. It's terrorizing that guy, these, his thing's on fire, and can you see it, Enterprise? And, Kirk makes a really brave decision here, understanding that in Spock in the briefing room, they have that whole conversation, and he's like, we have to show a force of, if we don't, they're going to be back in bigger numbers.
Well, that was actually a really cool part of the episode to me, because like, that was whatever his face is, the prejudiced one's idea. He was like, no, we have to chase them. If we show weakness, they're going to be back. And then Spock is like, yes, if
they're if they're an offshoot of the Vulcans, and I believe they are, he says, then like they're a war creature, and they're all in, and we have to fight this. And then
or we're going to war.
Like or they'll be back in bigger numbers, and we'll have a war in our hands. So what you do here is super important. And it's one of those things where Kirk has to be brave and just like not wait for orders, which he does quite often, and he does what he thinks is right, and that is really why I like a lot of this episode, because I like. Again, this is a 1960s TV show. Mm-hmm. We're in the middle of the beginning of the Vietnam War. Not the middle of the beginning. That's terrible. But we're at the beginning of we're getting out of Korea. We've got proxy wars all over the world with Cold War stuff, and I think that this is and obviously Roddenberry's experiences in World War II. Knowing about submarine stuff and even just like Pearl Harbor, there's so much there that in the 60s, which is still very present in in American culture. I don't know. I like this episode a lot. There are some goofy things in this episode. I like the scene where they're all being really quiet and they're not doing anything. Yeah. But somehow Spock presses a button.
Yeah, he sets off an alarm or something like that.
And the guy's like, it was it. It proved it. It proved he's a Romulan. He's a spy. And it's like nobody. How about the doors opening? The doors are like nobody was right. That's pretty loud. Is this the episode where Janice Rand uses a phaser to make coffee? Is that this one? She's is that this where she shows up on the bridge with coffee?
She does something.
Yeah, and there's a phaser in sickbay, which is a funny thing. There's a whole canon thing about why there are phasers in sickbay, which also come back in episode 6. There's they go and they get phasers and they shoot at the thing. There's phasers hidden around the ship, so in case the ship's ever taken, I suppose. She makes hot coffee with a phaser.
We also get some power scaling in this episode as well, because how far would you say 100 meters is?
It's a football field.
Yeah. They were that far away from a nuclear explosion that
Shields
went off
are
next
good,
to
man.
their ship.
I do like that concept that the Romulan commander throws his best friend's body into the thing. This ship is not a durable ship. Their shields stink. No. Which again, because they don't plan to go home. Yeah. And it is very it is Hunt for Red October-y in the sense
it's meant to be hidden. It's not meant to directly take fire.
Right.
The Enterprise is definitely a much more powerful ship than.
Well, and the Romulans probably came whatever happened to that guy, and they're kind of know that it didn't go well.
Yeah, he died.
Yeah, they didn't come back, so maybe we're not going to go crazy here with the Federation. Maybe they're a little bit more prepared than we are. The hypocrisy what drives me crazy is in Star Trek is the Federation is always so afraid to go into the neutral zone, and the Romulans go in the neutral zone all the fucking time. It drives me crazy. I'm but they were in the Romulan. It's like watching a football game. But they went offsides. They were offsides first.
The Federation this is the start of the Federation's track record of just letting the Romulans get away with whatever they want.
Give them an inch, they'll
to.
take 100 meters and put a nuclear weapon in a metal casing off the. I love that they just happen to have a couple of old nuclear style weapons carrying around on the thing. So a couple funny things about this episode, which I think are kind of covered, that are fun to think about. So the Romulan War took place, and the treaty was done by subspace communications. So there was no visual. There was no visual stuff, which is a weird canon-y thing that kind of gets confused. They couldn't have picture two.
Yeah, that caused problems later on.
That's another one of those getting oh my god, but it's funny because if Star Trek Enterprise, the Scott Bakula show, would have gotten their next season, they were doing the Romulan War. And I think that would have really been a great, great season to have seen how the Romulan War and all the treaty and how they ended up, and obviously Captain Archer and that crew would have been a big part of that. And I think that would have been a lot of fun to see what a Romulan ship looked like in that time frame, and I think that would have been fun. I assume you have not gotten in far enough into Strange New Worlds yet where they do this, so we can't talk about it, but they do a great Star Trek What If. Captain Pike was captain of the Enterprise in this episode.
Yes. So Captain Pike doesn't.
So Star Trek, obviously Star Wars, Marvel does What If on Disney Plus. And actually on 716 Attack Legion tonight, I think we're doing a What If for Star Wars. Everybody's supposed to pitch ideas if they did a Star Wars what if, like what if Luke Skywalker or whatever. But Star Trek does a what if. What if, for whatever reason, Captain Pike is captain of the Enterprise during the Balance of Terror episode? What would that be like? And
he might not have chased him.
And that's the premise of the episode. And obviously the crew's a little bit different. But when you watch that episode, they do a tremendous job of doing that what if, the implications of the universe, and also just kind of how they kind of rearrange some of the characters. But what's great about the episode, they use a lot of the same dialogue. Like a lot of the dialogue, the stuff that like Spock says, for example, is literally lifted directly from this episode. Like it's word for word the same script. The conversation that Captain Pike has with the guy on the one station is literally word for word, like from this episode. Like what the guy says, like we're 3 miles underneath in an iron court. Like it's literally like they knocked their shit. Like it's literally because why would that change? Like why would in a time, what if time frame, that guy would be saying the exact same stuff that he said to Captain Kirk, and the Romulans would be attacking the exact same way. And it really doesn't change until Pike makes his administrative decisions versus what Kirk would have done. And it really is I think down the road when people are looking back on episodes of Star Trek, I think that'll be top 10. I think when you watch that episode, you'll love it. Especially because it's such a comparison to this episode.
Yeah. So back to this episode for a moment. The fact that I like the way that the sensors worked in this episode, because like the fact that so first of all, the cloak disrupts the Romulan sensors, or at least we're led to assume that.
Yeah, they can't they can't see, their sensors aren't super efficient when the cloak is up.
Yeah, so like the Kirk, he does this on purpose, I think. He stays like very much parallel to them in
Right.
such a way that they appear to be some kind of an echo in the Romulan sensors.
Right.
Which then leads them to, the Romulans to fly into the that was a cool bit.
Yeah.
Because they're like, all right, so how do we get them? Well, let's kind of, I think the Romulans were just kind of naturally heading in that direction. Maybe I don't think the Enterprise forced them in that direction.
No, they didn't, because they're not even sure the Enterprise is there initially. Because remember, when at that point they kind of sense, the Romulan commander is pretty sure that he's being followed. He's a smart enough commander, and he's experienced enough. And so I think he purposely, when he sees the comet, he's like, all right, I'm going to get these guys. I'm going to trick them and see if it's a shadow or if it's them, because they're going to try to get me. Because if I was a commander, I would do the same thing. And I like that you have this, these two guys, everybody else is playing checkers, and these two guys are playing chess. I like that a lot, and Kirk acknowledges that he's up against the guy that knows what he's doing too. Like it's not just a ship that knows what he's doing. The commander's a bright dude too, and Kirk admires him too, because he's like, I would have done the same thing. He's like, I won't underestimate him again.
Yeah, I think that's how the Romulan actually almost got Kirk, was like he sensed that
Right.
there was a trap happening, because they go into the comet and they're like,
Right.
The Echo no longer follows us, and he's like,
Right.
turn the ship around, and
Right.
they
Right.
turn around, uncloak, fire their thing at the Enterprise, and that's how they almost get the Enterprise the first time.
And then the Enterprise learns from that point on too, how far they have to stay away from that ship, so that if they have to use their emergency warp to get away, so the guy can't fire at them, but they keep just throwing in whatever phaser blasts that are just disrupting the ship, and large chunks of styrofoam fall from the ceiling, and
crushing the Centurion.
Centurion, dude, it's just styrofoam. You're fine. Get it, walk it off. No, it's metal. Okay, but it looks like styrofoam. I'm sorry, it looks like a big chunk of styrofoam. But
a casualty of the more advanced visual technology, I think.
I do like the helmets the Vulcans wear. which is
the Romulans.
The Romulans have those cool helmets that kind of cover the ears, so they didn't have to do ears for everybody. Because ears, I guess, were really like a pain in the ass to do, so they didn't want to do more than they had to. So that's why most of the time when you see Romulans, and Vulcans, you won't see more than just a couple set of ears.
They look like old school football helmets. Like,
I was thinking
the
of
old school
Rick and Morty, and the one Birdman guy.
Absolutely.
Has the same helmet that the
Influenced
Romulans
by
wear.
Romulans.
It's totally influenced by. He's got the Romulan. It's like a Romulan. Like it's definitely like he's, whatever. I can't think of Is it Birdman or is that what the guy's name is? And he has that stoic, like Vulcan-y, like voice anyway. Everything comes back to Rick and Morty. But what else you got? I mean, this is a really good episode. I think this is a really serious good episode.
I wanted to go over how Kirk actually beats him because that you mentioned it earlier. It was like they drop off the nuclear bomb. The nuclear bomb, which was probably in all likelihood as powerful as like the Tsar Bomba or whatever, it goes off 100 meters from the ship. They get knocked out of commission, but not.
Well, they do destroy it with phasers, I believe. I believe
they
were able to fire at it, which I think reason why they do survive a nuclear explosion is because whatever they did by triggering it themselves, it sounds like. I don't think the yield would have been as. I think technically we're supposed to assume that the yield wasn't as big.
Maybe they just hit it with the exploding because I think if it wasn't their own phasers that did the damage, I think Roddenberry might have not understood fully how nuclear weapons work. I actually forgot that they shot at it.
Right.
Because if you shoot a nuclear explosive device, it won't go off. It'll just kind of vaporize it. Like it's designed to work in a very specific way, or else it doesn't do anything.
But again, we don't know the technology of a Romulan nuclear device. Like it could be built differently, so
or
it could,
whatever they fired at it was enough to trigger
part of the maybe some of the matter exploded as opposed to some of the plutonium or Vulcanonium or whatever unobtainium or whatever it is that they have in their nuclear weapons.
Yeah. They just put a singularity drive in there.
That's pretty. There you go.
But
the red matter from Star Trek 9 or whatever movie that is.
We're going to the past now.
Yeah.
But they get knocked out of commission for a while, and the Romulans don't exactly know what happened, so they're kind of like keeping their distance, which allows the Enterprise.
Well, the commander says, "Let's go home," and the other guy's like, "No, you should finish the kill." And he's like, "No, I'm not going to do that." And that, that's kind of the fatal mistake, so to speak.
One way, I forget exactly what the reasoning is for them to stick around rather than to either run or to attack.
Right.
But the fact that they did that was their doom, because eventually the crew of the Enterprise fixes the ship.
Right.
But Kirk says, okay, we're gonna go ahead and sit here, though.
Right. He wants to lure them back in because he senses that the commander will probably I should just go finish the job. I should go finish the job, finish the mission. And so Kirk does the play dead several times in Star Trek, and it's a trope or whatever, but it's smart. Like it's a smart play. Like pretend you're more damaged than you are.
Yeah, I mean at this point he's really counting on his opponent who he has been. They've been learning about each other this entire time. He's counting on his opponent rather than completing his mission, which would be to return to Romulan space and
and report.
Yeah, report.
And I think that's kind of why part of me is like why they want to get home is so he can report. And he also doesn't trust that commander because he says, I don't trust that guy. Like, I don't trust him. And that the Praetor, whatever, the other guy who's with him's like, you have to do it. And he's like, but I don't trust that commander. Like, he's devil in my thoughts. He's reading my mind. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff with that. And you can see why they brought that actor back because, Mark Leonard's really good. And, let's make him Spock's dad, too. No, I mean, definitely, there's definitely some cool, again, chess being played here between the commanders, and he lures them in, and then
Yeah,
And then there's the thing. Then there's the ironic twist that the one guy has to go down to the phaser lab because
I
a bunch of the
forgot.
people were injured because of the radiation, including the guy who's getting married and his wife.
Yeah,
They both worked in phaser control.
I
And
forgot
then
about
Spock just happens to be walking around with a clipboard, and he goes. There is a funny moment where Spock hears over the PA. Well, I don't know why it's over the PA system.
Fire
Phasers, and why it's
Fire.
like over the intercom in the hallway. Like everybody and like that it's in maintenance knows what every some guy down in like in the bowling alley knows what's going on the bridge, and Spock runs. But he has to go around the corner, and the boots are bad, so he has to do this like little like goofy run when you're trying to run in like dress shoes. And he like goes, run, and he does like a little funny run. I laugh like, come on, just edit out right before he gets to the corner. Like you make Spock look stupid. You make him look like, whoa, our boots aren't made for running, man. And so so he runs around the corner, and then he goes in and he goes in there and he saves the guy, and the guy's like, I hated you, but now you saved my life. So they had to do that. I mean, that was just kind of a story, like a B story, like wrap it up. And then the guy, and this is kind of weird, like that the guy dies and not the bride.
Yeah.
I found that kind of interesting.
Yeah, you get the kind of reversal of expectations there,
Yeah.
Just, well, your husband, I guess maybe it's not a reversal of expectations in a way because, like, World War II, you had all the guys going
Right.
off, a lot
Oh,
of,
I guess you're
a lot
right.
of
It kind
widows.
of is kind of that the guy doesn't come back from the mission versus the girl. It would have been pretty brave to do it the other way around, probably in the 1960s, to kill the woman. It probably the censors or somebody, the network probably would have been mad that she killed the woman versus the guy. Like I can imagine that being a meeting that someone didn't like that you killed the woman, the guy should die instead. And I love the scene because she's in the chapel. And that's how the show ends. I love the ending of this episode, by the way. Like they go to he's in sickbay with McCoy, and McCoy's like, well, how many died? He's like, well, the one guy, and the guy, he was getting married, and he goes, the bride's in the chapel, and he goes to the chapel, and he's like, you have to know there was a reason. She's like, no, I'm all right, like, which is kind of step up her lip kind of thing, and Kirk is really upset about this. Like you can tell he's really upset, and I love the shot because he leaves the chapel, which is essentially just some room on the ship, and he's walking down the hall, and it's directed really well that he's just kind of walking, and he's just kind of like, and there's other guys in the hallway, there's other crew there, and then he gets that strut back, like he gets back to like, all right, back to work, and he comes out and he's kind of emotional, and then he gets back into being I'm the captain. I have to show strength, and he starts, and the music's really good in the background as he's like, dramatically doing his walk through the hallway. And I always remember the ending of that episode, and I always find that emotional that he is the captain. He's incredibly sad that this guy died and this woman didn't get to marry her love, but he's got to be the captain, and he's got to be Captain Kirk. And I love that. I just love that. I love that ending. I think that, again, that we pick on these shows, these old shows. But these shows were directed well. They were envisioned well. They were written well, and they were acted well. Like you can pick on William Shatner's overacting at times, but he deserves credit for playing such an iconic character, and in conjunction with the director knowing how to play that scene.
Yeah, there were limitations imposed by technology on this show that, if you look past them, you see that there's a lot of eye for detail.
Right.
Like there's just
For
so
sure.
many little things that I just absolutely adore. Like the fact that, it's not, I think in more recent Star Trek, you have these duels ending with, I darn you,
Right.
and then they blow up. Instead, it's, you get the Romulan, he's just sitting there, and he's like, I think we could have been friends.
Yeah, like in
we're the
another
same
reality, we
person.
could have been friends, and he's like, let us help you, and he's like, you can't help us, like we're creatures of duty, one duty to go, and once again, that creates an incredible amount of canon for the Romulans. They're these really heavy creatures of duty and to their society, and that is pretty. That stays pretty consistent through Star Trek with how the Romulans are.
I mean, the
The
Federation also does that too. Like they'll self-destruct the ship if it's about to be captured.
Yeah, there's definitely Well, that's even like in the Klingons. Like if you're captured as a Klingon, like it's a thing of disrespect. Like you should commit suicide rather than be captured. Like you shouldn't be captured. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff that covers that. They talk about that Next Generation, with like Worf's father and the Duras family and all that stuff. Where they do all the Worf stuff about being captured.
Yeah, they touch on that in Deep Space Nine too. Eventually,
Yep.
During the Dominion War.
Yep.
When we're reintroduced to Martok.
Yep.
Who is
Great character.
one of my favorite.
Yeah,
characters.
Martek's such a great. Ah, yes. If he talks about the wedding one more time, like, I love that the guy's got a bad eye.
Yeah.
Like, so they purposely had him be blind in one eye because the guy had a bad eye anyway. Like, the actor has a bad eye. Like, he's blind in that. He had bad vision in that one eye that he loses anyway. That's a nod to the actual actor's own disability.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't know that until recently. I saw that in a documentary.
Yeah, it doesn't show when he's doing stuff out of costume.
I don't think he's like blind. I think he's just legally blind. I think he has some vision, but he has to mainly use whatever eye that works.
Editor Martok.
Editor Mark.
Here's the artwork for today's work.
I think that I can't wait till we get to Deep Space Nine because it's really it's so much. It's such a good. I've been watching the Center Chair or something. It was called. It was a documentary on. I think it's on Netflix now, and it's narrated by Gates McFadden, who plays Dr. Crusher, and it goes through like each episode is like a section of like the first episode is how Star Trek got started. I think the second episode's about how Star Trek goes away. I think the third episode's about the animated series. So each episode is about like a period of time. I think the fourth episode is about how motion picture gets made, and then they only do one episode on Deep Space Nine, one episode on Voyager. I wish they would have done more, but it's not even a long series. I think there's only like 9 episodes in the whole thing, and it's from 2021, so it doesn't talk about most of the newer shows, but I'm not even sure it covers Enterprise, but it's definitely, there's a lot of cool little things you'll learn about. And there's not a lot of actors in it. Most of the conversations are from people that were behind the scenes. So it's more about Roddenberry fighting with everybody and where there were those, when they got to the movies and the way and even there's a lot of conversations about like why Deep Space Nine, for example, is how they were able to get away with doing some of the things that they did because everybody just kind of got fed up with them. So,
yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
All right, you have any closing thoughts on Balance of Terror?
Again, I think if I was going to tell someone to watch Star Trek,
this would definitely be a required
top 4 or
watch.
5. I think this episode, City on the Edge of Forever.
Oh yeah.
I think if you just want someone to have fun, watch Trouble with Tribbles.
The Gorn episode.
The Gorn episode's a good one. The Gorn one's kind of hard though because of the. It's such a bad costume. It's just Captain Kirk. I need throat lozenges. And they're a big advanced species, but they're wearing like a Tarzan, like loincloth. I mean, they don't have uniforms. I mean, I'd rather them just not wear anything. Like the loincloth is such a weird does he just wear that when he's going into battle? Like maybe the rest of the time he's just on natural. I don't know. Either he should have had pants on or something. I don't know. The loincloth was just why? And he's just got a knife. He makes the knife, which is kind of funny. But but the Gorn's a good episode. Such an iconic location. Everybody, you can go there now because it's literally there's a parking lot next to where they filmed that episode. But now we get into
it is Shore Leave.
Shore Leave.
Which I don't believe you have a thing for.
We do actually think it's on the cassette tape.
All right, we're on to
it's Star Trek Westworld.
All right, so let's.
This is the Westworld Star Trek. I feel like they totally stole this from Michael Crittenden Westworld.
We are. Oh, is that written before this?
I think so.
Oh.
I think they ripped off Westworld.
Oh, that's nice.
What happens if Captain Kirk went to Westworld?
Yeah, this
or a corrupt Disneyland.
This one was a lot of fun, but it was kind of absolutely everywhere. And,
yeah, for sure.
We'll see. There's actually, I guess I should probably read the blurb first. A white rabbit Don Juan, and a samurai warrior.
Right.
These strange sights await Kirk and the crew when they beam down for shore leave on a mysterious planet. And we have a picture of the night that they encounter, which is like really dark, so it's barely visible. And we have Kirk with his ripped shirt that...
Yeah.
You remember how his shirt
One
gets
of many times that his shirt gets ripped.
In this one... You remember when his shirt gets ripped in this episode, right?
It's towards the end when he's fighting Finnegan.
Yeah, he gets flipped over Finnegan. He lands. His shirt's fine. They cut to a close up. His shirt's like in tatters.
It was worn down, and then
Just disintegrated right
Yeah,
then
like-
and there, in between the cuts. No, but this. So the issue with this episode is that basically it was written with like a lot more fantasy, like so much more fantasy in the original script. And Roddenberry was like, this is too much. This is way too much fantasy. We need to get back into the sci-fi a little bit.
Oh, okay.
He sends it to another writer who is like, oh, so you wanted more fantasy. Gotcha. So he rewrites the script with even more fantasy. So they get to the shooting day, and Gene Roddenberry's basically just sitting under a tree while they're filming, writing the script as they're doing it.
Oh, my Lord. Well, I guess Westworld, the book hadn't come out yet. So maybe Michael Crittenden or whatever his name is ripped off Star Trek.
So they actually, this was written by Theodore Sturgeon. So that would be the guy that wrote it originally with too much fantasy and then had to be rewritten.
Well, that's the one thing that I learned like through many sources that I've read, that Roddenberry's a jerk when it came to like script writing. Like he was a control freak. He would go and he would steal the script and he rewrite it and then change it and like anything. Like he was just like everybody, liked working for him to some extent, but there's always that thread that like, oh God, even like DC Fontana, Dorothy Fontana, who wrote a lot of episodes, like he would like put his name on the episode after he wrote it, helped her even though she wrote it, and so he could get half the money. And so a lot of it was his ego. Like he was just very difficult to work with at times, they said. Yeah. But he would do this on a regular basis.
I mean, to be fair to him with this episode, like even like in the basic premise of the episode, like the episode that we got has a load of fantasy like elements.
Yes.
So I don't know what the original script was.
Yeah, I don't know how the original script was supposed to end. Like in terms of, like if they decided how they changed the ending. It's funny. I don't know much about that backstory on this. You probably sounds like you know a lot more than I do. But basically they beam down to a planet and essentially there's sensors, like really bad radio antennas that just kind of pop up and there's a guy holding them. That's how they work. And, like a bunch of coat hangers, and they're able to read your thoughts. And from there, they have sounds like a replicator that is able to create something they're able to read from your mind. So if you're thinking of Don Juan, they're able to bring up, Don Juan, and they have they pop them up to the surface, and Don Juan acts like Don Juan. So they were able to program these things almost instantaneously. And they're basically a Disney World for an advanced race that we never meet. So we don't know who actually runs this planet, or this is pre-Ryza and some of the other fun planets that people go to on vacation. But this is a vacation planet.
Yeah, like they're I think Kirk goes on to expand on them. They're like, well, a more advanced mind would need more advanced play or something like.
Right.
It's kind of a weird justification, but
Yep.
I'll tell you what. This is one of those episodes that like left a foundational memory for me, because like I remember seeing this episode.
Is it the two girls from the cabaret that?
No.
Okay, that was a different foundational memory. So.
I wish that was the foundational memory.
Right.
It was like 8-year-old me watching McCoy gets stabbed in the damn chest.
Oh, yeah, right.
Like, I was not expecting to watch McCoy just die.
Just die.
Yeah, like I think I'd seen the movie, like maybe a movie at this point, like
right,
because of, some family member would show it to me or whatever.
Right.
And then I'm like watching this episode, and I think I'm like at Virginia Beach, and like we're just kind of hanging out. McCoy gets stabbed in the chest. I'm like, wait a minute. He's not supposed to die.
Like how do they kill like a regular? You're not used to that. And as opposed to like, it seems like Kirk dies a lot on Star Trek, but I think McCoy dies a couple times.
Well, he definitely dies in this.
Well, I mean, like I guess the thing is like, was he really dead? Like I guess like it's funny like how the yada yada that. I don't know if it's like almost like almost like it's probably almost something like. Like holodeck safeguards where you can't die. Like they have a way of, I would assume like nowadays we would have a lore type thing that if he gets stabbed in the chest and his heart should stop, that because this is not a real planet. No. Everything on this planet is manufactured. The trees, the rocks, everything is fake. So it's essentially a holodeck. And really essentially is a holodeck, but it's physical. These are physical things, but I guess you could really expand this that essentially they're all that you can't be killed because they have almost like holodeck safeguards almost, where so if you get stabbed in the chest, you didn't really get stabbed in the chest, but you think you got stabbed in the chest, so you react to that.
I mean, McCoy's...
Because otherwise, like, how does he get stabbed in the chest and not really die? And he comes back and his shirt's fine, by the way.
I mean, McCoy... I'm just going off of what McCoy says. He says, oh, yeah, they got some advanced stuff down there. They just fixed it right up. I'm like, really?
Right. Well, so maybe, like, if they're as advanced as even Next Generation, like, the technology between 100 years between or whatever it is between, like, Star Trek and Next Generation is, like the medical advances are huge. So,
yeah, I would say, like... The dermal regenerator technology in the Next Generation is very close to what
these guys
says. What happened? Right. Also, those things are gross. Like did you see the close up of like the night when that was makeup? I think that was a real guy. They poked him like in the face and
and they just did really bad over the top like greasy makeup and stuff.
So gross.
Yeah, and it's funny because like Ruth looked all right, and Finnegan looked okay.
Let's talk about Finnegan real quick.
Let's talk about Yeoman Barrows. Whoa!
Yeah.
Women of the 60s. Here we're talking. Yeoman Barrows was pretty damn hot. I mean, I remember being a little kid like, that's an attractive woman.
Yeah, honestly, she, not to make this conversation go there, but she, to me, is more attractive than Yeoman Rand was.
Sure. I would agree with that. She doesn't have a stupid wig, like weird, like beehive, like hat on.
She doesn't.
Like that's not Yeoman. That's not what's her name, Grace Whitley's real hair. Like she would have been much prettier if they didn't make her wear that stupid like cone head that she had to wear.
Yeah, she didn't have the rug on her head.
And it's weird because nobody else had that. Like Uhura didn't have a fake hairdo. None of the other women on the show ever had fake hairdos. I mean, I'm assuming that. Nurse Chapel, that was a wig. I'm pretty sure that blonde thing that she wears is a wig. I don't think that's her natural hair.
No, I don't. Yeah,
because it looks like a wig. But Yeoman Barrows is not wearing a wig. Like she's just kind of hot.
Yeah, I think they actually kind of reference that in in Deep Space Nine when she's trapped with Odo in the because if you didn't know, Nurse Chapel then becomes Deanna Troy's mother in TNG and Deep Space Nine, and in that episode when she gets stuck in the elevator with Odo, she takes off her blonde wig and it's brown
I'm
hair.
wondering if that's a nod to the fact that she had to wear a wig on the original series. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. Plus they also needed a plot mechanism for her to make Odo feel more comfortable with the fact that he puts on a fake facade, but so does she. And I was like Major Barrett, or I always pronounce her name wrong. Majel Barrett, the actress who's Gene Roddenberry's wife. No, this is a fun episode. Like clearly they decided they needed a fun episode, kind of a silly one. I like when Star Trek occasionally lets you have some fun, and because it lines up with the concept of what the episode's about.
Yeah. I like how Kirk's best dream is to get into a fist fight with somebody.
Well, no, because he's like,
or
because he's
what he-
picking on, like, I love the way the dialogue leads to those memories.
Oh yeah.
Because remember,
Yeah, that's
everybody's picking on McCoy because he saw a giant white rabbit and a little girl. And they're like, oh, yeah, sure you did. And he's like, oh, you feel a little picked on, And he's like, yeah,
yeah.
I know. I used to get picked on when I was back in the academy. And he's like, yeah, like, this asshole Finnegan, man, upperclassman. So he starts telling a story, and then all of a sudden here's Finnegan.
But he did have a lot of fun, though.
He did end up having a lot of fun. We also thought of Ruth, too. So,
Although
who we never hear about ever again. We never hear about Ruth ever
no,
again.
Ruth kind of disappears into.
Yeah.
the
I don't know
ether.
why it's not Carol Marcus, but we,
Finnegan is a victim of advanced viewing technology, I'm afraid, because he says, "I'm 20, my boy," and he's just got like all these.
yeah, like
crow's
he's just
feet.
clearly like,
Like-
but the actor's clearly not as old as William Shatner. Though.
Oh no.
And I like the fact that he's wearing like the old like uniforms from like the pilot. Like he's
Yeah.
wearing like I think the same silver shirt that like one of the guys wore in a menagerie. Like I think it was like an older. So they did like put in like an older thing, and I do love that. I do love that Finnegan's like just doesn't fight fair, and like that Kirk's having fun with that. Finnegan, what's happening to my people? I don't know. And like, I never answer questions from plebes, Jimmy boy. And he's like, I'm not a plebe. Like, what are you doing here? Like, I'm being exactly what you expect me to be, Jimmy boy. And when he says that line, Kirk has now confirmed that this is all bullshit. Yeah. This is all bullshit. He's already starting to sense it. Like, even when Spock beams himself down, they already kind of realize there's something going on, that this is not reality.
Sulu comes and he's like, "Yeah, there's a samurai chasing me."
Yeah.
I wonder whose idea that was, because George Takei really put his heart and soul into the word samurai for that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, I'm assuming they decided, since he was, a character that was supposed to be Japanese, that they said, well, let's have him interact with something that from his own, memories, that for whatever reason that he would see that.
Why was he thinking about it?
I don't know why the one guys. The one guys were talking about we got the footage of a bomber, like a World War II plane.
That had to have been archival footage.
Yeah, like that's definitely archival footage. And
then the tiger, which
got the tiger.
Fun fact: William Shatner wanted to wrestle it. And Cooler,
it's got a necklace on, so it clearly was a trained tiger.
Yeah, cooler heads told him that, maybe it's not a good idea to wrestle the tiger, Maybe we don't do that.
That tiger. I always want to look up the IMDb credit on the tiger. Is that the same tiger from other tiger things? Like, how many tigers in Hollywood did they have that were acting? Like, there had to be a limited number of tigers.
They had an
out
elephant
there
on set that never got used.
Oh, they never used the elephant on set? I never know there was an elephant on that set. Wow.
Let me tell you, that producer was not happy about that.
That they didn't use the elephant?
Yes, that's expensive.
Well, it's weird because, it's clearly just the Hollywood backlot where they are. That's all just not backlot, excuse me. That's
it's like the field or something.
Like that's all areas that they used for production before. I think the lake. I think when you see the lake, I think that's the same lake from Gilligan's Island. Somebody told me once. I think some of that is. I looked it up a long time ago and I forgot to look it up again. But those are areas that they film in pretty regularly in Hollywood, in the Los Angeles area. It's maybe 10 minutes from Paramount Studios. And obviously, that area where they're running around that's rocky is that same area where they filmed the Gorn episode. It's that same, kind of. If you've never been to California, like the Anaheim area, it's funny. If you drive, I've driven from Las Vegas to California, and you go through and you're like desert, Anaheim. It's literally you come over a hill and all of a sudden there's houses and lush green stuff. It's mostly desert, so it doesn't take. If you're in Anaheim, Los Angeles area, and you want to get to the desert, it is not far. You don't go too far away from the coast to get to like state parks and stuff that have all that different greenery and rock and everything.
Yeah, that's part of what makes California such a good place to film in, is just
Right.
like there's so much different variety in terrain in such a close area. Like you got the redwood forests where
Right.
the speeder chase was filmed, and Star Wars, and I
Right.
imagine Star Trek eventually did something with that.
Well, like even like if you think about I'm trying to think of like MASH. MASH was filmed in Los Angeles. Like it's like the MASH sets are just in that same area that they own. Like Paramount owns those areas out there. I don't know if they still do, but like even where they filmed Dukes of Hazzard, like that's all that same area. Like that's all those same areas, that land that they have access to that they use for filming. There's not a lot of private property on those, because it'd be impossible to, if you didn't have access to land like that, how would you film a TV show that has 22 episodes if you had to rent it every single time? So I think a lot of that property is just land that I don't know if they still own that land, but they definitely own that land back in the 60s and the 70s.
If anything, they probably own more these days.
Yeah. So
I mean, yeah, it's a fun.
what else do you like about? I mean, there's a lot of fun stuff in this episode. I like. There's a lot of camaraderie between the characters a little bit, like when they're kind of off when they're kind of like off duty, so to speak. McCoy making the moves on Yeoman Barrows.
Yeah, that was interesting.
You got the two. You got the other couple that's down there.
Who one of them being the crewman that was.
Oh,
meant
that's
to
the
get
same
married.
girl,
Yeah.
isn't it?
It was.
Man, she did not take long.
No.
She's hooking up with Gomez or Lopez or whatever that other guy is.
I think it was Gomez.
I think it's whatever that guy's name is that's telling her about like what it's like to be shot by a World War II plane.
Why was he thinking of that?
I don't remember. I'd have to go back and watch exactly what the context was. Like a scraping run. What's that? Like what we're about to experience right now.
Yeah, there's a.
I like the Don Juan guy. Like the Don Juan guy is just like.
Yeah,
He's got the sword, and like Sulu's trying to figure out how to grab a sword from him, and
Yeah, I don't know what that must be an older reference. Well, more. It must have been more culturally relevant back then.
Well, there were movies. I think the movie Don Juan had probably come out probably in the 60s. There was a big Don Juan movie that came out around that time frame, probably like late 50s, early 60s. And obviously he was quite the ladies' man, so to speak, because that's the conversation that they're having. Like all you need is a Don Juan, the type of thing. It's kind of funny. Like it's funny when we think about like those types of references, things that were more in the public consciousness, like we talked about with Where No Man Has Gone Before, like ESP. Like nobody talks about ESP anymore. Like it's not one of those things that. Whatever that time frame, people more jokes. There were more. It was more something that was more in the public consciousness then.
Yeah.
But this is a good episode. It's not a great episode, but it's a fun episode. Nothing wrong with it. I've watched. I invested in the $13 to buy the VHS tape. I liked the episode enough.
Yeah, the guy.
I like the music, the fight scene music in this one.
Oh yeah, they composed music for this, like that fight scene from
Right.
where we get that Irish kind of
Right. Yeah,
bar
definitely.
music.
Yeah, definitely.
that was composed for this episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
I doubt we ever see it again though.
I think they use it again. I'm sure the music gets used again. Most of this music gets reused. But there's some episodes, like the music when they're first beamed down to the planet, like they don't use a lot of that music again. I do like when the alien guy shows up at the end and he's just like, "Hey, everybody."
Yeah, this is just
Captain Cook, Mr. Spock, Yeoman Barrows. like,
amusement park.
I don't think you guys are quite ready for this place. But, and it's kind of cool. Like, and they do have a really... And then there's that terrible scene at the end of the episode where they all been back to the bridge and Spock's on the bridge and he's like, "Did you guys have a good time?" And we did, Mr. Spock, we did. Most illogical. And then they all just start that fake laugh. Ha, 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 ha.
Spock.
They're all laughing fake.
I just kept looking at Spock like the entire time, like he was standing next to the one guy
Yeah.
who was like expositioning as to what this place was.
Right.
Because Spock's just got his hands on his hips and he's
Right.
just like making faces like,
Right.
oh.
He's like, this everything about this planet is stupid because we're Vulcans and we just meditate.
And that was a weird like little thing that he did with that one like.
He just touches. Just
Yeah,
like,
he's just
all
like,
due
yeah.
respects to the young lady.
It's like,
I've already had enough shore leave. Like,
Oh,
it's like, take care.
When do you do that, Spock? What was that?
He was very nervous about the android, fake
Yeah,
creature's feelings.
Yeah, Spock was Spock was getting into it a little bit too much.
Like, there is some funny stuff there. Like, he's like, I was thinking of these two girls I met in a cafe, and he's like, he's like, cabaret. He's like, she's like, and who? Oh, he's like, oh, well, I am on shore leave, and he's like, oh, I have chance at the real lady versus the robot ladies. So he decided to.
Yeah, she got over that pretty quick.
I like that the one goes right for Spock. I think that's pretty funny. That was probably one of those decisions that they made kind of last minute to kind of just have her. Like, it'd be funny if one of them didn't go to the regular guy. One of them decided to go make a move on the guy with the pointy ears. So it's a fun episode, and I think that's good to have some fun episodes. And like in a streaming world, this episode would never get made. Like, where we have 6 to 12 episodes of a show, we don't get these one-off episodes that don't really have any purpose. Although on the animated series, they go back to this planet.
That must be. I heard about the script, but I didn't think it ever got made. Like, it was part Shore Leave 2, I think was the name of the script.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they didn't actually. I'm pretty sure there's an episode of animated series where they go back to this planet. Yeah. I could be wrong, but there's definitely some like repeats on the animated series where we see like Cyrano Jones again because we get the Tribbles again. We see well, the Tribbles are different. The Tribbles just get bigger. They don't get more Tribbles. They just get bigger. They get really fat.
In the animated series?
In the animated series, the Tribbles just get bigger and bigger and bigger.
I thought you meant just in Star Trek in general.
Well, yeah, we only see Tribbles a couple more. I mean, we see Tribbles, obviously, like in Deep Space Nine, and I think that's just an incredible episode.
That's going to be a fun one.
I
wonder if we should cover both of those episodes at the same time.
We probably should kind of do like...
jump from Trouble with Tribbles.
Just talk about Trouble with Tribbles and then go right into Trials and Tribulations. And again, why it's so good. Like, when you think about the production quality of how they did that pre-CGI, they did that without a lot of the CGI that we take for granted nowadays. They had to build things. They just couldn't green screen the shit out of it and put it in the volume. They had to build sets. They had to really go out of their way. They had to know what color gray was used to paint the wall. Like, they had to literally do their research. I definitely think when we get to Troubles with Tribbles, we'll jump out of order and we'll just do a Deep Space Nine episode.
I mean, so we get an entire fight scene and. Well, first of all, we, once again, another victim of superior viewing technology. Clearly not Captain Kirk, fighting him in some of the scenes. But we have this whole fight scene. It's a very good fight scene, by the way. Like, very well choreographed.
That episode is very difficult to tell which scenes are not, which ones aren't William Shatner.
Yeah.
Clearly, Rolling Down the Hill is not William Shatner. But most of that, I think Shatner did a lot more of his own fights in this one.
He did a lot of it, yeah. Like, there's one scene where his stunt double, like, stands up and just, like, is mugging the camera, basically. And like, okay, that's not William Shatner. But, like, unfortunately, we don't get a true double fist punch in that entire fight scene.
No.
But we do get something close. Kirk kind of goes like, on his kidneys when they're fighting.
He does kind of a double fist punch to the lower kidneys to the back.
Yeah.
So I think we'll count that as a double fist punch.
I'm gonna count it. Like,
we're gonna count it.
He's got him like this, and he goes like.
Yeah.
So I think I'll give it to him.
It's like with boxing, you're not supposed to hit there. You're not supposed to. So it's kind of like under the. You know, I do like the ending where he kind of just like, you know, he just kind of knocks him out, and he's laughing as he does it.
Oh, yeah,
He's having a blast by the end. He's like, I'm being, because he gets up. That's right after when he says like, you know, I'm being expected what you be, Jimmy boy, and he's like, kind of makes up for things, doesn't it, Jimmy boy? And he's like, a lot of things, and then he gets up and he just knocks him out, and then Spock's like, did you enjoy it? I did enjoy it after all these years. I did enjoy it, and he's like. And it really clicks at that point that everything that they're experiencing for the most part, unless they do something in like ridiculous, like stand up on a roller coaster. Like you can have fun on the roller coaster, but you have to kind of follow the rules on the roller coaster so you don't hurt yourself. And that's kind of what some of the people have to be careful what they're doing.
Yeah,
so
unfortunately, McCoy stood up in the roller coaster. Got his.
I'm going to
arms
stand
knocked
up
off.
to this thing and say like to the knight with a big pointy stick.
Yeah, I'm not sure why this amusement park followed through on that.
I'm not sure why they find. Sulu finds a gun for some odd reason.
Yeah,
you know, like because he's a collector, and so for whatever reason he must have been thinking about his collection, and they find like a stock pistol. You
Sulu
know,
just thinks about weapons and
Sulu,
warriors
man.
all the time. Like,
yeah, he's just got
he's really the only person who really has no like connecting like sinew. He just there's a samurai. You know?
Yeah, it's funny. Like of all the characters, like I guess him and Uhura, we got like that one episode with the salt monster where she was thinking of her ideal man and stuff like that. But we don't really get too much with Sulu. Like even Chekhov, we meet one of his ex-girlfriends in a future episode. I do feel like Sulu doesn't get nearly enough kind of backstory as most of the other characters. I think everybody else gets backstory. I feel like Sulu never really gets a backstory episode.
Yeah, we get like bits and pieces of him. Like we get, he's a fencer, he's a botanist.
Right.
Obviously he collects weapons.
Right. He's the ship mathematician.
Oh yeah.
Remember originally he's the I don't know why that camera keeps going out of focus.
So go to the wide when I have to go to.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean it's fun, it's a good. I don't think I would direct people to watch this episode necessarily. Like if I was to choose episodes from season 1, I don't think this would make the cut.
Right.
If say they could only watch 3 episodes from season 1,
right,
this wouldn't make it. But
it's interesting too because a lot of these episodes, I feel like even Balance of Terror, I feel like the way it's shot, I feel like it was probably made earlier in the season than when it aired. Like just some of the makeup and the lighting had evolved by later episodes. And, so it's definitely different. And I feel like it makes sense that this episode takes place right after Balance of Terror because it seems like they're in need of shore leave. Because they just went through a pretty traumatic thing. So they're going, they're just investigating and they decide to use this planet for shore leave just to give everybody a break. And I think this is the first true real episode where they're not on the ship the whole time.
No, they're
and everything else was on a soundstage. This is like they're literally out in like a real environment. I think this is the first episode of Star Trek where they're not on the ship and they're actually on a like real world set as opposed to just like their version of the volume, whatever they used to call that soundstage that they used to film everything in.
Yeah, it definitely had more of because it was real. It had more of a real feel to it. So
just like the next episode where we're not going to talk about today, Galileo 7, that's clearly filmed on a planet. Because clearly that where the Galileo landed with all those rocks all right around it. Is clearly a real-world environment and not a soundstage.
Yeah, I think I went to a place like that in like downtown Buffalo once.
We're just like, yeah. So I'm definitely, I think this a lot of cool. I mean, like you said, like this is a fun episode. I think this is one of those episodes you would have to be more of a fan of the show and kind of want to see and learn a little bit more about your characters. And that's why, again, back then when they used to do 26 episodes a season or whatever, 25 or whatever, 24 or whatever it was, that you could have an episode where you had a little bit more fun, where, like I said, I think that's some of the things that we've lost in kind of the modern day storytelling, that, some of the best episodes of Star Trek might not have been told. Like real quick to wrap this up, I guess, in my mind, jump to Deep Space Nine, The Ascent. the episode where Quark and Odo have to get to the top of a mountain.
Yeah, that was just a one-off.
One of my favorites. I would put that episode in my like top 10, 15 Deep Space Nine episodes. That episode doesn't get made today. We're not going to do a story about two characters stuck on a mountain just to give our two actors who we think are really good at their characters and have a deep lore between them one episode to kind of work it all out. And that episode wouldn't get made nowadays with streaming television where you only get 12 episodes. Now we don't got time for that because every episode, even in an episodic, Deep Space Nine was moving away from episodic, but they still found time to work in these types of episodes. And I think that I love the Ascent. I think that everything about that, if I was home today and that episode was on TV, I'd sit and I'd watch for an hour and I'd watch, Odo and, Renee Obanovos and Armin Sherman have this incredibly funny episode. And everything that they do to get to that last scene when they're back in the sick bay. You remember when I told you you hated me and I hated you? I still do. And then they just start laughing. They won't admit it. And it's like, you don't want them to admit it. You don't want them to be friends. You don't want Quark and Odo to be friends. Yeah. You want them to kind of constantly rib each other. Like, even though they do things that they're not nearly as big enemies as they were at the beginning of the show. But I mean, but then you want to, after 7 years, you want to have fun episodes where the characters grow. Like, that's what we expect. We don't want characters to be like a rubber stamp when they're created and they don't evolve. Like, that's the best part about character development.
To be fair to the newer stuff, that episode where Spock and his Pon Fu, what are they called?
His girlfriend?
Yeah, I guess girlfriend works too. That episode when they switch bodies
is great.
That is very much a one-off. We're just gonna have a wacky adventure episode.
Yeah, wacky adventure. I loved it. There's cool stuff with that episode. I mean, I think it's great. I think like it really gets you to see how good that actor is, how good Ethan Peck is at playing Spock, because then he has to play this kind of other version. He gets to play a different character. He gets to play his girlfriend, and then she has to be very Spockish. And then there's the funny moments. No, I think that I really like that episode a lot. I mean, it's really, it's Freaky Friday meets Vulcan. It's a lot of fun. And I think that and even that show, they only do 12 episodes a season. Doing 12 versus say maybe 8, like what you get on a typical Marvel series or something, even Star Wars stuff, like you're getting, like give me enough that you can have a couple episodes where they're fun stuff, Yeah. No, I think Deep Strange New Worlds has found that nice mix of being serial but also being episodic. So cool.
All right.
Good job over there, in the Auxiliary Command.
Yep. We made up for it. We switched out the stations. Yeah. We're doing well. So
you got to be able to run all aspects of the ship.
Yes.
You don't want to just be like, because like Geordi started off as a helmsman and then next week he was the chief engineer. Seems like a bit of a jump. Seems like he should have worked in engineering for a couple days before he became the chief engineer. Like, imagine you're the other guys in the engineering department on Next Generation and you're like, wait, where's the guy that was the chief engineer? Like, because there was a variety of people in the first season of the chief engineer, right? There's a guy, and then there's a woman for a couple episodes, and then all of a sudden, we never see them again. Yeah. And then we just suddenly, like, Geordi's now the chief engineer. Imagine you're like the other guy. Like, you were the assistant department chair, and all of a sudden you're like, the guy with the hair clip on his eyes? He's in charge now. But he's never even worked in engineering. Yeah, but,
Or we could be like, I happen to think of myself more like Picard when he's like, move aside, Wesley. Let me take control of this ship here.
I do like that. I mean, that's one of the things. Like, definitely when we get to Next Generation, we can definitely discuss like the comparisons of the conscious decisions to cast a different type of captain. Yeah. That's not necessarily like, I'm gonna beam down and kick some ass. Like, Picard never just beams down and kicks some ass too often. So.
Nope.
All right.
All right. Well, that's probably going to do it. I want to thank y'all for watching this. Not
To the
yet.
gym? Oh, not
We
yet.
got,
Sorry.
if you have any,
Sorry.
next week we'll be covering. Well,
Whenever we get back.
When we get back, we'll be covering
The Galileo
7
7.
shortly. Very brief coverage of the Galileo 7. Hopefully, we move straight on to.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about Galileo 7.
it's- They land on a planet. They fight some giant things.
I feel like there are going to be some moments where we're going to have to just kind of like, well, this episode happened. And
Definitely.
because we go through, coming up, we have Galileo 7, and then we have the Squire of Gothos, which I'm not super fond of.
I don't even remember that episode.
That's the guy he's wearing a lot of, he's kind of like Liberace. And then we go to Arena. So I almost feel like we should knock off the Galileo 7 and the Squire of Gothos quickly, as that way we can get into Arena.
Oh yeah. We'll probably race right through the Squire of Gothos and the Galileo. They're weird episodes. They're just kind of like they're really out there.
I guess this is the exact opposite argument that I just previously made about why you don't need one-offs. Because this is like, oh shit, we need an episode 14. What are we gonna do? Let's have a dude. Let's have another omnipotent dude. Just fuck with the crew of the Enterprise.
Yeah,
And it turns out he's Q anyway, not the Q, but he's a Q.
that's what he seems.
That's the
like.
theory that he's a Q.
But
So.
if you have any opinions on the Squire of Gothos or the Galileo 7, you can send them to doublefistpunchpodcast@yahoo.com. Or, if you have any opinions for the arena, send them to doublefistpunchpodcast@yahoo.com. So I'm Rick. This is Rich.
I'm Rich.
Yep. And I want to thank you for listening to the Double Fist Punch podcast. I swear we'll get to it eventually. I can't hit the feed the back. I didn't.
And just hit stop recording. There you go. Well done.